On my mom's birthday, she raised her glass and said, "The best gift? You leaving my life." So I packed my things, sold the house, froze all accounts, and disappeared. A week later, I had made her favorite poached salmon with lemon butter roasted carrots and a peach tart from scratch. I even found the old floral linen she liked, the one with the frayed edges she used to scold me about but secretly adored. It was Vera's 64th birthday, and I told myself this year might be different. Not better, maybe, but quieter. The table was set for 6. Vera at the head, flanked by her bridge partner June, our cousin Lori, and 2 neighbors who had known me since I was a teenager. I poured the wine, offered smiles past dishes. It was almost easy to pretend this was love. Then Vera raised her glass. "To aging without baggage," she said, smirking, as she swirled the wine, "and to finally having a life free of dead weight." She looked directly at me. "Honestly, Marin, the best gift you could give me is to leave my life." No one spoke. June coughed softly. Lori's fork paused mid-air. I stared at Vera, blinking once, then twice. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't want to hear it again. I stood slowly, excused myself with a smile that wasn't mine, and walked to the kitchen. I rinsed my hands under cool water until they numbed. Then I took my coat from the hook and left without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in the dim kitchen, still in my coat. The tart was untouched on the counter. The sink held empty glasses, wine-stained and half-rinsed. I looked at the chair where she had sat back, straight eyes smug, and wondered how long she had been rehearsing that sentence. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe it was instinct. I thought of all the birthdays before this. The ones I spent making hand-sewn gifts as a child. The years I decorated her front porch with candles. The decades of trying to earn something she never planned to give. I got up, placed the tart in the fridge, and stared at the dishes. I didn't clean them. I went to bed with a taste of silence in my mouth and her words ringing in my ears. The next morning I opened my journal to a blank page. The page stayed blank for a long time. I held the pen, but didn't write. My hand hovered over the paper like it was waiting for permission. And in the stillness of that morning the memories came uninvited. I was 26 when I dropped out of grad school. Vera had slipped on the ice outside her porch and fractured her hip. "You're all I have," she said over the phone, her voice thin and manipulative. I remember the way the professor's face fell when I told him I wouldn't be finishing the semester. "Just take a leave," he said gently. I nodded. But I never went back. I moved back into the house that week. It was supposed to be temporary. Years passed in increments: appointments, medication, groceries, errands. I took a job at a local library, flexible hours close to home. I dated quietly, but never seriously. Every time someone asked about a future mine, I found a way to change the subject. When Vera asked if she could freshen up the house, I agreed. She painted over the yellow hallway I loved, and replaced the kitchen tiles with cold gray squares. "It's more modern," she said. I convinced myself it didn't matter. It was still home, even if it didn't look like mine. I let her throw out the chair I bought during my first job. I laughed it off when she called it tacky. I said yes to every little no. "That was our rhythm?" she asked. I adjusted. But now, in the quiet of this morning, it felt different. The pattern wasn't devotion. It was disappearance. A slow unraveling, strand by strand, until I couldn't tell where I ended and her expectations began. I lowered the pen and finally wrote something. I gave up so much trying not to make her feel alone. But I never asked if I was allowed to want more than surviving her. The ink bled into the page. I tore it out, folded it carefully and tucked it in the back of the journal. Then I pulled open the filing drawer and began looking for my bank statements. I didn't sleep that night. My mind paced even when my body didn't move. I kept replaying all the moments I should have said something, drawn a line, made a choice that centered me instead of her. But I hadn't. I had waited for the situation to become unbearable before I dared to name it. In the morning I made tea but didn't drink it. I sat at the kitchen table, opened a new journal, and wrote the sentence as if it had been waiting years to exist. "I have been edited out of my own life." The words landed harder on paper than they did in my chest. I read them twice, then underlined them once. Then I began. I made a list of everything Vera had access to: joint accounts, the house deed, my password scribbled on that kitchen notepad, She always pretended not to notice. I circled the things that needed to change first. Next, I gathered all the paperwork I could find: insurance forms, bank statements, the will I had signed without reading years ago. I called the bank and scheduled an appointment to remove her as an authorized user. I searched for legal referrals and found a small law office 2 towns over. The lawyer's name was Thomas Reyes. I liked the sound of it: firm, not flashy. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Lori. Not my neighbor. Certainly not Vera. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger. It was air after holding my breath for over a decade. That afternoon, I stood in the hallway and looked around at the house, not with sentiment but with precision. What was mine? What had been given, and what had been taken without consent? My eyes landed on the old maple desk near the window. It was the last thing my father had touched before he died. I opened the drawer and pulled out the small envelope where he used to keep emergency cash. It was empty. The next day, I drove to meet the lawyer. Vera noticed. Not right away, but soon enough. I stopped reminding her about appointments. I no longer filled in the silences with polite conversation. I cooked only for myself, using the small pan instead of the big one we used to share. She began hovering again, offering half-sincere smiles, commenting on my clothes like she was trying to sound maternal. One morning she tapped on my door with a tray of burnt toast and oversteeped tea. "I figured you'd be tired," she said gently. "We haven't talked much since." "Well, you know." She waved a hand, vaguely pretending not to remember the words she had etched into the center of my chest. "You mean your birthday?" I asked. She blinked. "Oh, come on, Maureen. It was a joke." I was tipsy. People say things. I nodded but didn't let her in. Later that week, I sat across from a bank manager as she pulled up my account history. I watched her face change with each line she scrolled through. "Someone's been transferring funds regularly to another checking account," she said. "They're small amounts but consistent, over 6,000 this past year." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I already knew. That evening, I found Vera folding towels in the laundry room. She looked up with that tired expression she wore like armor. "I saw the withdrawals," I said. She straightened. "What are you talking about?" "My account. Thousands. Taken without asking." Vera sighed and dropped a towel into the basket. "You're overreacting. It was for things we needed: repairs, prescriptions, your car maintenance. You never asked. You wouldn't have minded." She snapped. "You always said we're in this together." "God, Maureen, you're being so selfish." I stared at her. "Selfish," I repeated. "Yes," she said, her voice rising. "You act like you're owed something just for living here." I didn't reply. I walked past her up the stairs and into my room. I locked the door behind me, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to explain the boundary out loud. The next morning, I found a letter in the mailbox without a return address. The envelope was plain, the paper thick, folded neatly in thirds. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting before I opened it: neat, slightly slanted, written with care. Mrs. Darnell lived 2 doors down. We'd spoken maybe a dozen times in 15 years. She always waved from her porch but never lingered. "Dear Maureen, I hope you don't mind the letter. I don't want to intrude, but I've watched from my window for a long time. Not to be nosy, just to bear witness. I've seen what you've carried, what you've given, the way you disappear to make others more comfortable. You are not invisible, Maureen, and you are not wrong. With quiet admiration, Elaine Darnell." I read it twice, then once more, just to feel the words again. My eyes stung, not from pain, but from the foreign comfort of being seen without having to explain myself. I folded the letter along its original crease and slipped it into the back pocket of my journal next to the torn page I had written after the birthday. It didn't fix anything, but it steadied something in me that had been wobbling for years. That evening, I made dinner just for myself and didn't offer to share. Vera didn't ask. When the dishes were done, I opened my laptop and searched for a notary near the county clerk's office. I had already called Tomas Reyes. The next step would be signing the documents. I checked the locks before I went to bed, then placed the journal on the nightstand where I could see it. The next morning, I dressed in quiet clothes and drove to the attorney's office. Tomas was calm, measured, and precise. His office smelled faintly of cedar, and the walls were lined with certificates I didn't need to read. I trusted him the moment he said, "You don't need a war. You need a boundary that holds." We spent the better part of an hour signing papers. He walked me through every step, freezing joint accounts, updating the deed, revising my will. At the end, he slid the final form toward me. I hesitated only briefly before signing. Outside, the wind had picked up. By the time I got home, the first drops of rain had started. Vera was in the kitchen. She looked up from her crossword. "Where have you been out?" Her eyes narrowed. "You've been distant lately and secretive. I don't like it." I said nothing. I went upstairs. That night the storm came, not from the sky, but through the phone. It started with a voicemail from cousin Rachel. "What's going on over there? Your mom called, said you're freezing her out." "That's cruel, Marin." Then came the texts from old neighbors. The passive-aggressive ones just checking in, heard some worrying things. And then Lori, who didn't bother sugarcoating it. "I can't believe you do this to her. After everything she's done for you." I turned my phone face down and let it buzz itself into silence. Downstairs doors slammed harder than they needed to. Cabinet drawers opened and shut with sharp intent. Vera moved through the house with heavy footsteps, as if sound alone could carry her blame up the stairs. I stayed in my room and wrote it all down. I am not punishing her. I am reclaiming what is mine. The next morning, Vera banged on my door. "You've made your point," she snapped. "Now undo it." I opened the door just enough to speak. "It's not a game, Vera. There's nothing to undo." She stared at me, incredulous. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least this regret will be mine." I shut the door and locked it. 2 days later, a notice was delivered to the house, official, notarized, and irreversible. By the end of the week, Vera was gone. She didn't say goodbye. I heard her dragging luggage across the hardwood floor just after dawn. Her voice, sharp and muttering, carried through the walls as she called someone to pick her up. A car idled out front for 10 minutes. Then the door slammed and I heard nothing else. I waited an hour before coming downstairs. The living room was still. A few picture frames were missing, some drawers left open, but the bones of the house had stayed. My house. My name on the deed. Now uncontested. The quiet pressed in, but this time it didn't feel like accusation. It felt like breath. Like space. I started slowly. The painting of the wildflowers I'd tucked away 5 years ago. I hung it back above the fireplace. I changed the bulbs in the hallway to warm light. I brought my grandmother's quilt down from the attic and spread it over the couch, the blue and green stitching still soft under my palms. I opened every window in the house. Let the air move through each room until it carried her scent away. Later that evening, I found an old tea tin at the back of the cupboard. The one I used to keep tucked in my nightstand drawer before Vera declared it clutter. I brewed a cup and drank it on the back porch, legs tucked under me. The sun slipping behind the trees. I thought I might cry, but I didn't. Not then. Instead, I sat with a calm so quiet I almost didn't recognize it. Not relief, not victory. Something else. Something like return. That night, I slept with the bedroom door open. The next morning I registered for an art class at the community center. The room smelled faintly of pencil shavings and turpentine, warm, lived in without expectation. No one asked me why I was there. No one asked my last name. I found a seat near the back, opened my sketchbook and waited. The instructor, a woman named Callie with silver-streaked curls and paint on her sleeves, welcomed everyone without fanfare. "We're not here to be good," she said. "We're here to begin." I hadn't drawn since I was 22. Not really. Not since I left school and tucked that part of myself away like a luxury I couldn't afford. The first few lines were hesitant, my hand stiff and unfamiliar with movement that once felt instinctive. But by the second class, something shifted. I wasn't drawing to be seen. I was drawing because it felt like breathing again. No one in the room knew about Vera. No one knew about the bank accounts or the slammed doors or the birthday toast that had cracked something open. They only knew the way I shaded light, the way I smudged with the side of my thumb, the way I laughed softly surprised when someone told a joke under their breath. It was enough. Each week I came home with charcoal under my nails and a sense of stillness I didn't try to explain. I began rearranging the house one corner at a time. I painted the guest bathroom a pale sage. I moved the reading lamp to the other side of the couch. I filled frames with my own sketches, quiet portraits of hands, trees, and once a single daisy. One afternoon I found myself humming while cooking. It startled me. I hadn't made noise just to fill space in years. That evening I sat by the window with my journal and wrote one sentence: I'm not building a new life. I'm remembering the one I left behind. And then, the phone rang. It was her voice, hollowed out but unmistakable. "Marin," she said barely above a whisper. "It's me." I didn't say anything. The phone sat warm in my hand, balanced between memory and instinct. "I'm not well," she continued. "The doctors found something, and I thought you should know." I let the silence stretch. She sighed. "The kids ask about you. They miss you. We all do." It was the word "we" that struck hardest. I could picture her saying at her hand on her chest, like it justified everything that came before. "I'm sorry," she added softer now. "I said things I didn't mean. But this house doesn't feel right without you. None of it does." I looked out the window where the daisy sketch now hung in the corner of the glass. The light hit it differently, every hour. It had become a kind of clock for me, marking time by how it changed. "I'm glad the kids are well," I said. "And I hope you're getting the care you need." She paused. "So, can we talk? Maybe come by just to see you?" I closed my eyes. "I can't go back to being small so you can feel big," I said quietly. She exhaled sharply, wounded or angry. I couldn't tell which. "So that's it. That's it." She hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat there breathing. The quiet didn't feel like punishment anymore. The next morning I stepped out into the garden with a trowel in one hand and a packet of seeds in the other. The soil was dry but soft, the kind that welcomed change. I pressed the lavender seedlings into the earth, gently spacing them with care, then followed with sage along the back edge of the fence. I didn't rush. Each handful of dirt felt like a promise. When I stood to stretch my back, the sun was low and warm across the porch. A breeze moved through the branches, and for the first time in years I could hear the world without a filter of tension. I stayed out there until the light shifted to gold. Then came the knock. 2 girls stood at my front steps, maybe 7 or 8, their faces open and curious. One held a basket lined with a kitchen towel. "Hi," the taller one said. "These are from my mom." The younger nudged her and added, "She says your garden makes her feel brave." I blinked, caught off guard. "Well, that's very kind," I said, crouching to their level. "Tiller," I said. "Thank you." They smiled and ran off before I could say more, their laughter trailing behind them like ribbon. I carried the basket inside and set it on the kitchen table. Still warm, the muffins smelled like cinnamon and apple. I didn't eat one right away. I just stood there, letting the quiet stretch wide around me. Later, I lit a candle in the living room and opened my journal. "I thought disappearing would break me," I wrote. "But maybe I was never meant to be seen by them. Maybe I was meant to see myself." The candle flickered, casting a soft halo of light over the pages. And then I turned to a fresh sheet and began to draw.